How's it going, everyone? I am Jeremy Alexander, and welcome to another video where we make a platformer. Now, this is an updated video on the platformer logic I've been using in a lot of videos, and I thought that I would show you exactly how I'm doing it now versus what you might be used to, or just to kind of clear up how I make platformer animations and collisions and handle all of that from the start. So we're not going to be doing a full platformer game, but hopefully this will get you started if you're new to Construct 2 or you're new to making a platformer game in general. So what we're going to do is we're going to go File, New. We're going to make a new retro style project, which is suited for pixelated games, which is exactly what I like to make. I'm going to select all the objects that come with this template and delete them. And from there, I'm going to actually set up our layout a little bit differently. Now, this layout has a size of 1280 by 1024, which is fine, but it's just too large. So I'm going to make it 640 by 360. Now this will actually be a lot smaller for my tiles to go in when we add a tile map, and this will actually just be a lot easier to manage for this tutorial. So the other thing I want to set up here, we can zoom out all we want, well, as far as this will let us, but we can't pan left and right. And to pan, you hold down space and you move the mouse left and right, and I need some more real estate for that for our outside area. So to do that, I'm going to go to our margins and I'm going to bump it up to 4,000 by 4,000, and now I got a lot of space to work with, just so it's kind of more like other engines that you might be used to if you're using Unity or anything like that. You can kind of just move around, put objects here, so there's a lot that you can do by adding in those margins. Okay, now that we have that, there's another feature here that I want to turn on. I want to be able to scroll past this edge, and for that point, all these edges. I want to be able to actually go over here, which actually lets us make a bigger level than we intended. So even though our layout size is only 640 by 360, we can actually have it go all the way over here, all the way down here, whatever we want to do if we turn unbounded scrolling on. And that also means that our camera object or any behavior that we use for that will scroll past as well. So I'm going to turn that on. Now that we have our property settings, let's go to our project properties and let's change some things here as well. I want to turn pixel rounding off just so we're drawing between floats instead of integers, so you don't need to worry about that now. We're going to go to our preview browser, and I'm using NWJS, which you can download on the Skira website. I believe it's skira.com/NWJS, so I'll put a link in the description to go download that. This will allow me to preview on desktop instead of previewing on Chrome or any other browser that I don't want to use. And then the only other thing we might come back to is clearing the background, but I think we are good to go other than that. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to make 2 more layers, and we're going to rename the first layer to become our background. We're going to name layer 1 to have that become our tile map, and layer 2 will become our player. Okay, so we can lock our player and we can lock our tile map for now. What I want to do is, actually, you know what, let's unlock our tile map. Let's double click and let's add a new tile map. Now, this is a tile map object. If you've never used this before, it's very powerful, especially for performance. This is better than having a bunch of different objects. So I recommend from here on in making every single game level with a tile map. This will just be completely better for your game. So I'm going to open the folder here by going up here to open or load an image from a file. I'm going to go into my run and gun here, and I'm going to load this tile map. Now, I recommend making your own tile map. This tile map is not available unless you're in my mega course, but I would recommend making your own tile map like this or something similar to it, or just try to draw your own. And I'm going to exit out of this. Now I need to set up this tile map. Fortunately, I know the exact dimensions. This tile's sprites are 16 by 16. Let's actually show the grid, and you can see that it's set to 32 by 32, which is actually kind of nice when you're using 16 by 16 because it doesn't make it as intimidating, but I'm actually going to change it just so it matches up for now to 16 by 16 so we can see this. I'm also going to snap it to the grid, and I'm actually going to show the collision polygons as well. I know your Construct 2 might look different from mine, so try to bear with it. It should all be very accessible in the home view and events tabs up here in case you don't see those. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to go to our tile map window here, and we're going to grab our tile map layer, and that is the object I have selected. We're going to go to our tile map, and from here we actually have all of these tools, which are very powerful tools. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the square tool, and we're actually just going to draw onto our map, just like this. And now you can see those red lines appearing. That is our collision polygon, so you can see where we're going to collide. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, and I'm going to make this kind of like 3. So this is going to be our level. I know it's pretty plain here, but I'm going to start to decorate this a little bit more. I'm going to actually use the mouse tool here, which you actually always have to make sure you go back to the mouse tool. I'm going to grab the square again, and I'm going to draw on our floor tiles like that. And then let's think what else I want to do here. I'm going to grab this, draw on our ceiling tiles, and now with this tile set, I'm able to create really smooth edges, just like this. So I'm going to grab all these edges, and I'm going to put them on like so. Now I got one other thing I want to make here, and that's a box. So to do this, I'm actually going to take this guy right here, the wall. Let me zoom in. Let me turn off the collision polys and the grid so you can see. I'm just going to kind of make this wall like this. Then I have this extra tile for a corner piece. And now I have the other corner, and I need to figure out how to put that down there. And it's a whole thing. So here's what I'm going to do for this. What I'm going to do, and this is why this is powerful, is I can actually take this tile with the pencil tool. So instead of the rectangle tool, I can grab the pencil tool and I can flip the tile right here. So by hitting flip, it'll actually mirror this tile's position, and it'll do that for any tile that you want, which is a lot easier than actually drawing out these tiles individually. So technically what I could have done was taken these 3 tiles right here, and I could have flipped them to have these. But it's actually kind of nice to have them all if you do. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm actually going to take this tile, and I'm going to turn off the flipping since I do have them correctly. And I'm going to put that there and put that there. And now I kind of have a better looking map. I realize that this is a square edge versus the rounded edges, but for right now, I think this is going to work perfectly fine. So there we go. Here's our level. It only took us, 5 minutes to make our level or whatnot, just to get our project set up. Let's go to our layers. And actually, before I do that, I see that I didn't switch back to the mouse. So let's go back and make sure we do that. Let's select our tile map and add a behavior to it of type in solid and hit enter. Now, unlike other game engines, specifically Game Maker, you want to use the solid property when you can, especially for things like collision polygons. There's instances where it makes sense not to use the solid object, but for the most part, or solid behavior, for the most part, it works pretty well. Let's show the collision polys again. You can see that they're all squares. They're all bounding boxes. And one of the cool things you can do is you can go into the tile map here, and you can actually, if you select a tile, or if you just double click on a tile, you can actually edit that collision polygon for it. So by adding a solid behavior to this tile map and using the collision polygons, we now have a much better and much faster way to handle that collision for our player object. Okay, so let's select this and let's make sure that it's on the tile map layer, which it is. Let's lock this layer and let's go to our background layer. So our background layer is actually really important, especially now that we have unbounded scrolling set to yes, because we can scroll past the edges. If I hit play here to preview this, actually, it's not going to show it. But if I hit play, you can see that this background's white, and over here, the background would be white. So this would kind of look terrible. To fix this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the collision polys here. I'm going to click on our background layer, and I'm going to go to my background color. I'm going to drag down this little arrow. I'm going to hit other. And now I'm presented with a color panel window that'll actually let us pick a custom color. You can actually design the color to be whatever you want, but all I need to do is hit this button here, which is select, and it'll actually let me pick any color in the editor, which is kind of crazy. I wonder if it'll let me pick any color in this editor only. So I'm going to pick this color, which is our exact solid color for all around the edges of our map. So let's hit OK, and you can see just like that, it'll change. Now, it's actually going to look kind of bad with this background color, just this little window being that color, but every other edge will be fine. To fix this, what I'm going to do is on this background layer, I'm going to actually grab this tile map, and I'm going to put this like this. Now, I could technically leave this like this, but I think it'd be better if I went in, deleted this, and then just kind of took a random color to kind of just match that, or at least offset that color. All right, that's going to be fine for now. It'll at least showcase that there is a background and you can see our player more clearly. All right, so that was about 10 minutes of setup, but we are ready to add in our player. So let's go to our player layer. Let's double click and make a new sprite. Let's put this on our player. And what we have is a few options here. We have a few options. We could just draw our player in right here if we want to, or we could actually load in an image file just like we did for our tile map. But the problem with doing that is it'll probably be one at a time. You can't do more than one image at a time. So that's not what we want to do. Click on your animation and go to the animation frames window and right click and import from frames. Now we have two options here. We can import from a sprite strip or we can import from files. So what we could do is if we had a sprite sheet, we could actually designate the columns and the rows where our player is, and it will actually, Construct 2 will actually slice it up. Like you've seen in other engines, it'll actually slice up your sprite sheet, and from there it'll actually import those as separate frames. I find that this works, 75% of the time, but what really I like to do is go from file. So let's go from files, let's go to our player, and let's actually get our walk. So walk 0 to walk 3. Now I'm going to hold down shift, and that'll actually get all of my animations. I think if I hold down, let's hold down shift and hit open. This will actually get it in order even if it didn't display it in order. And now we actually have to delete frame 0. It actually bypasses frame 0 and adds it to frame 1. But now we can see that I have my walk cycle just like this. Cool. So before we do anything else, let's rename this animation from default to ID_walk. We'll get into the ID in a second. What we're going to do next is we're going to do that for the other animations. So let's just make a new animation by right-clicking Add Animation in the Animations window. Let's double-click on that, right-click, Import Frames from Files, and let's actually add in our idle animation and hit Open. I'm going to delete this, and I'm actually going to put this on top of the ID walk just for, organizational purposes. It doesn't really matter what order they're in. I call this ID idle. Let's add in our ID jump, our ID fall, and let's add in our ID slide. Cool. So in our ID jump, now technically I could import from files, but I could also load from an image because it is only one image. So I can go find where it says jump, which it does say jump. There it is. And there we go. I'm going to do the same thing for fall. I can just go find fall if I can see it. There we go. And same thing for slide. All of these are single images, and I think it's very useful to have them as single images. You could have your jump and your fall be animations, but I recommend using them as single images. It's just a lot easier to process. So here's what we're going to do now. All of our animations are set up specifically for their size. They should all be 10 by 18 for at least this character. So if you have a character that you're using, then you want to make sure that every single frame is the same size. If it's not the same width and height, it's going to mess up. Even if you have the same collision box, even if you have the same origin points, it'll mess up. And it might not mess up in a huge way, but if you did have a drastic change, then it definitely will. If you had a small change, you might not see it as much, but I promise you it's better to just make sure that every single frame, every single animation is the same. So now that I've double checked that, what I want to do is I want to double check my bounding box. So if we go here, we can actually see this collision. Now this collision acts as a mask. Now, technically you should make another mask object for your player. And that's something that I like to do to handle extra collisions or extra things just to give our player some padding. But this actually handles as a very solid mask to start with, and therefore we can leave it as a bounding box. There are certain things such as the slide that we actually want to fix. And I can see here that it didn't even get to be a bounding box, so let's put that. And for example, what I mean by fix is we can hit Control after we select these, and we can actually move these X positions, or in this case, the Y position. Let's not hit Control Z. Looks like I deleted that, but my point was, oh no, here it is. My point was you can actually edit this to be, what is it, the minus sign? There we go. So if I move it like this, you can actually move it per integer, and you can get it to be pretty perfect like that. And if I hit Control, I can actually move both at the same time. So I can actually have this be smaller than a bounding box. But for the most part, it'll actually interact fine as a bounding box collision. Let's double check and see if anything else is messed up. I can see that our single frames actually don't have our bounding box, which is probably because Construct 2 decided to try to actually analyze where these pixels were. So to fix this, what I'm going to do here on our ID idle or wherever, I'm going to right click and set to bounding box. I'm going to right click apply to all animations. I'm going to hit yes. And then when I look at these, they should all be bounding box. All right, let's do the same for our origin point. Our origin point is where our character is pinned on the layout. And you can put it on the bottom and that'll work fine. It's also where our character flips between. So I found that putting it in the middle is going to be your best route for it to flip left and right naturally. And also actually just helps a lot better instead of pinning it to the top left or to the bottom, which are the other two common ones, especially when it comes to tiles. So right click, let's do the same thing, apply to all animations and hit yes. So now every origin point is the same, every height and width of the sprite is the same, and every collision is the same, and we have every single animation prefixed with ID underscore. So now we're going to get into the programming and how this actually works. Actually, before we get into the programming, now that we have our player, we actually need to do a few things for the properties. Let's go and set this to be object player. Let's actually give it some behaviors. The first behavior is going to be our platformer behavior, and the second behavior is going to be our scroll to behavior. I don't think we need to give it any other behaviors besides that. This should be enough, and there's your platformer game. Right out of the box, this will work perfectly fine. So if I hit play here, you can now see our preview in our tile map. You can see the tile map collision working, and you can see our platform behavior and our scroll is working perfectly. So just like that, we have our platformer game. But this is not fun. This is really beginner, and this is really basic, and this is actually perfect if you're just starting out. If you got it to this point, really, it is congratulations, because this is what you're trying to achieve. You just want to know how to make it a little bit better. So to do that, here's what we're going to do. We're going to add in our animations, but we're also going to tweak these parameters. So if we go to our platform behavior, you can see here that we have a bunch of different parameters or properties associated with it. The first is our default controls. Let's turn that to no, because we actually don't need to use the arrow keys. By default, they are set to the arrow keys. I'm going to actually program them to W, A, and D. The next one we could do here is our max speed. So let's go all the way back up to the top. Our max speed is a little too fast. In case you didn't notice, it kind of felt like it was a race car instead of an actual person trying to move. I'm going to put it down to 150. I found that 150 has worked out pretty well for me. And it's just, I don't know, it's a lot slower. Same thing with our jump strength. We were jumping so high that we just don't need that. So let's put this down by 200. Let's go to 450. Everything else we can pretty much leave the same. And one of the really cool things about the platformer behavior, if you're new to programming, is it does have a double jump feature. Literally, if you want to program double jump, double click this and you will enable it and it's done. So to that point, Construct 2 is very powerful. All right, our scroll 2 is enabled. Everything else is good to go. Behavior-wise, we are ready to begin programming. Actually, right before we begin programming, we have one more thing to do. But if I hit play, and we don't have the arrow key control anymore. But if I just put that on for 2 seconds, we can see it's a lot slower. Our jump is a lot more appropriate, and we can kind of maneuver just a little bit better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add one variable to this object. This is going to be for this object only. If I were to make a clone of this object, then this variable that I put on this object will apply, but the value of that object or of that variable will be different. So what we're going to do here, let me delete player 2, is we're going to go to our instance variables in our player properties. I'm going to hit instance variables, and I'm going to make a new one, and it's going to be a text, and we're going to call this player_state and hit OK. We're not going to give it any default values. We're not going to give it, we could give it a description. We can just say this is the state engine for our player and hit OK. So now, actually, if I did clone this object and I put this as, let's call this walk. If I clone this object real fast and I change this to idle, you can see that they're independent. This is walk, and this is idle, which actually differentiates these two objects as individuals. So let's again delete this. We don't need it at all. Let's delete it from the project as well. And let's actually focus on this. Let's leave it blank because we want it to let it be filled in on its own. Let's go to our event sheet. This is where we actually get to start programming. The first thing I want to program, though, is I want to get in our keyboard movement that we have disabled, or at least I should have gone back and disabled it. So let's do that. Let's add the event. Now, by adding in a retro style project, you actually have some basic plugins to begin with. You have an audio, browser, gamepad, keyboard, and mouse. And we also had our text and our tiled background, which we changed. And then we actually have some other cool plugins to use. But really, we just need our keyboard. So let's go to our keyboard. And in this case, we want to say if the key is down. And if the key is down, then we want to click and then we want to hit the key. In this case, I'm going to hit D, which is going to be our right arrow key. I'm going to copy and paste this event twice. Okay. Hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully you've kind of used constructor before and you know what I'm talking about. This is, again, targeted for those who don't know, or if you just want to see my updated code. So bear with me as we get through the rest of this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to double click on this and we're going to switch this to A, and we're going to switch this one to W. Now, what we're going to do is very easily, we're going to add an action. So here's the event that triggers this action. And this action for D is down is going to be handled in the player underneath the platformer properties. So just like the same properties we had edited, we're going to go here and look at these properties. And in this case, we want the bottom right simulate control. And since we're hitting D, we want that to go to the right. Now I can control click to copy this, and I can drag it down to the next event here. And I'm going to flip it. I'm going to put this to the left by double clicking and editing. I'm going to control click again, and I'm going to put this one to jump. So now I hit save. When I hit play, we can see that W, A, and D are working accordingly. Now we actually have our control back. Cool. So now that we have our control, we can actually get into doing our animations. And to control our animations, we want to use our prefix. So this is similar to how I've done it in the past. So I'm pretty much going to do the same thing. We're going to go add event system, type in every, or start to spell out every, and it'll search for it, every tick. Every tick is going to run every frame per second that this game is running. And every frame per second, what we want to do is we want to go to our player. We want to set the animation to be ID underscore, and that's it. Once we have that ID underscore, we can now pick any animation that we want because we've given them all the prefix of ID underscore. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pop out of this string. I'm going to hit and, so it'll tack onto the string, but it actually won't be a set string. It'll be a variable. Now this variable in particular is going to be the one that we added to the player. So let's type in object player and hit period, and now you can see all the properties that come with the player. We can access the platformer property if we wanted to. We can access pretty much anything that we want to, the frame count of the animation, how many objects, how many versions of the player are there, anything that we want, any image points, anything that we could possibly imagine. And if you scroll all the way down, you can see that this icon's even different. We can get our player state, which is pretty cool. I think I can actually make this bigger. Nice. Player state, just like that. And when we hit enter here, now we have successfully made a connection between our player and its animation. So if we double click and open up our player, you can see here that I have it called idle in all caps, walk in all caps, jump, fall, and slide in all caps, all with the ID prefix. So now all we have to do is fill in this information like so. Walk, or hold on, let's go to layout 1. You can actually, let's actually live debug this. If I pop out the debug right here, you can see that by putting in walk, let's go to our player. By putting in walk, we are walking. But if I quickly change this to idle, now we're in the idle frame, and these are the only two animations. The rest are just frames, so I can put this in as jump, and you can see the jump frame. If I go to fall, you can see the fall frame, and there we go. Let's put this to walk again. You can actually see this walking. So we've now successfully tied these two together, but now we need a way to call them naturally. We need a way to call them when we're actually moving, and here's where the updated code comes in. So we're going to add an event for our player, and we're going to find out if we're on the floor. So if we're actually colliding with the tile map, what is going to happen? Well, we actually want to make a sub event, and this is where I have found very little error from this line of code. By doing it this way, I have not come into any big glitches with setting the animation. What we're going to do here is we're going to double click and put it to our player, and we're going to check to see if we're moving. So if we're on the floor and we're moving, then we're going to be walking. So to set the walk, we're going to add the action to our player. Now we actually have, just like our platform properties, we have our instance variable properties. We can add to an instance variable, we can set a boolean to true or false, we can set the value, we can subtract, or we can even toggle a boolean. In this case, we want to set the value of our player state. Now, we know that our player state is a text value that only takes in, that we want to take in capital letters. But since it's a text value, we need to put it into string. So just like this, 2 quotation marks, we're going to type in walk. And just like that, will now be walking naturally. I don't need to go into the debug and change it, so I can delete that from default. And there we go. Now we have our walk animation. So now we want to actually put in our idle animation. Let's copy and paste this. And what we're going to do for this is we're going to do a few things differently. We're going to leave the platform on floor, and we're going to leave the platform is moving, but we're actually going to put this and combine it into this. So when we combine two events like this, it creates an and statement between the two. And the easiest way to explain this or to show this is by hitting Y on the keyboard. When I hit Y with this event selected, you can see that it actually puts a block in between, and it literally says or. And that is the inverse of the and operation, because by default, and doesn't show. It just doesn't say that it's and. It just says, it says if it's or, but it doesn't say if it's and. So by default, that's how you know you're doing an and operation. So if the player is on the floor and the player is moving, that's the logic behind that. If you put the Y there, if you hit Y on the keyboard, it would say, if the player is on the floor or the player is moving, then do this action. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Now we're going to do one other thing with this block, with this condition. We're actually going to hit I on the keyboard, and that's going to flip it. We're going to say if we're on the floor and we're not moving, then we're going to set this to idle. So we can get rid of this sub event. We're going to push that action up, and we're going to edit this to be capitals idle and hit save if you can save your project. Okay. So we've done a lot of stuff there. I think that is good. So I think that should work fine without testing it. Let's just keep going here since I've pretty much talked for this entire video. Let's copy and paste. Actually, you know what? We're not going to copy and paste. We're going to add the event again to our player. This time we're going to find out if we are jumping. And if we are, we're just going to control click this line down, and we're going to type in jump. And we're going to do the same thing for falling. So I can copy and paste this. I can double click on the event and switch it to is falling, set the player state to fall. All right, now I've already done a video on wall jump and wall slide that is on my channel, so I'm not going to actually put that in there, but the animations are there, so you can do the same exact thing. You can go follow that tutorial on how to do the wall jump and the wall slide, and you can put in the player state and you can set the animation to slide just like that. So we should be good to go here. If we hit play and we walk like this, we are walking. If we jump, we're jumping. And if we're fall, we should be falling. It doesn't kind of look like we're playing our falling animation as much. Well, that's okay, because we actually can tell that something's still kind of wrong with this. One, we're not flipping when we hit the control keys. Two, our animations are pretty laggy. They're not up to speed. So to do this, we're going to go into our layout. We're going to go into our player. Let's zoom in so we can see him. And you can see here that in the corner, there is actually a properties panel for every single animation. If I click on ID idle, you can see that the speed of this animation is at 5 and the loop is set to no. I'm going to change the loop to yes, and I'm going to bump up the speed to, actually, you know what? Let's leave that to 5 and let's see what happens. Let's go to walk though, and let's turn the speed up to 8. And let's see if that actually fixes our walk. The rest can actually have a speed of 0. And let's look at our fall. And even though we're not using slide, we can still put that to 0 because they're individual frames, and we can hit play. So our idle is kind of slow, but our walk is a lot faster now. So I'm actually happy with that. I mean, you can make this a little bit faster just to kind of prove the point here. If we go to walk and we put it to like 14, you can see that that should be a lot faster. And all this is doing is setting the frames per second. So if you have more frames per animation, then this might look a lot smoother, and this might be a lot better for your animation. So, you know, that's not that bad, but it's a little too fast, so I'm going to kind of mess around with it until I get to something I like. I like 8. Let's put it to 10, though, and let's see. We'll see how that looks. I want to actually do one more thing here, and that is to actually flip it when we're controlling our A and D keys. And to do this, all I need to do is add the action to our player, and I'm going to type in mirrored, and I'm going to hit OK. Now we're facing right by default, so when we're holding down D, we are actually setting our player to mirrored. If I copy and paste this into the A, we're now facing left, so we're facing not mirrored. And this will flip by our origin point, which is in the middle. So if I hit play here, you can see that we are flipping the incorrect way, so I guess they're backwards. Are we facing the other way? Not sure. But there we go. We pretty much have our entire platformer game from scratch. We've added in our level, we've added in our collisions, we've added in our animator with the kind of simple state engine, and we're good to go. This is pretty much how I do all the platformer controls behind the scenes. There's a lot more that we can add, and there's a lot more that we will add in the future. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope you got a lot out of it. Again, I am Jeremy Alexander. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, put a comment below if you have a question, and I'll see you next time.